Hey guys, what's going on? So what are we up to today? Today we're going to talk about part 4 of the basics of bass fishing. We're going to cover the jig. Jig is probably one of the most popular baits out there. Probably has won more tournaments than any other bait out there. It catches big fish. It doesn't catch the numbers of fish that you might with something like a shaky head or something like that, but it does catch really big fish. You're only going to get a few bites a day, so you know, you might fish a tournament all day and get 5 to 10 bites on a jig, but they're going to be quality fish, the kind of fish that help you win tournaments. So we're going to take a look at the different types of jigs and how to fish them today. So let's get into it. All right guys, so this is my jig box here. One of my jig boxes. You can see I've got a variety of colors and weights here. So a couple of things to think about with a jig. Are you going to fish it on the bottom? Or are you going to swim it through the water column? So this is a swim jig. It's got a bullet head to come through the water a little bit better than something like a football jig or an Arky style, so there's less water resistance there. They tend to have more of a cone style head on them. You can see that's another one. It's a swim jig there. It's more of a shad pattern. This would be good, really good in the shad spawn or fall when they're feeding up. So there's your swim jigs. You also have Arky style. It's more of a flatter bottom jig head. These are better for fishing brush, rock, stuff like that. You can see this is a Dirty Jigs 3/8 ounce. So you got that style jig head, and then you also have your football head style baits, which would be something like this guy here. You can see that's got round football head. That's where it gets its name from. This is really good for fishing structure offshore, something like rocks, stuff like that, just dragging it along, and it'll kind of pivot and bounce like that along the bottom. Obviously your colors are something to think about. Color depends on the water clarity. This has a little purple in it. This one, black and blue, would be better for muddier water. Something like this Damiki, black and blue Damiki right here. It's a good jig. And then obviously if you're in clearer water, you'd want to fish something like this green pumpkin. This is a Fitzgerald jig, very low, smaller jig. This is mainly for spotted bass. This is Brian Thrift's jig. He lives on Lake Norman, so when Lake Norman is really clear, it's a really good bait for those spotted bass up there. So there, yeah, you got your different types of jig heads, your different colors, and then last thing to think about really is your weight. How deep of water are you fishing? What time of year is it? Are you wanting a faster fall or a slower fall? A clearer water, you probably want a heavier jig so it falls quicker, so those fish get a shorter look at it, so they have to have a more of a reaction style bite versus a slower falling, lighter jig. So that's basically it as far as picking a jig. Let's take a look at how and where to fish it. Something else to consider when you're picking a jig is your trailer. Obviously you don't want to throw a jig without a trailer, unless you're fishing super clear lake or something like that. You want a really low profile, but I like the meaty chunk power bait. You can throw something like a chigger crawl, you could throw a zoom chunk, you could throw a beaver, Reaction Innovations beaver, something like a creature bait on it, but these meaty chunks seem to be really effective here. So that's what we're going to be throwing today. All right, as far as what to fish a jig, what type of cover and stuff, anything, obviously. rocks, brush, docks, like old Fred sitting on that dock right there. Let's spook him off there. Give me that fishing hole. Boy, he ain't too happy. Docks is the most popular place to fish a jig. Just pick a good stretch of docks and go skipping. Jigs, you can fish jigs 12 months out of the year. Just want to change your retrieve. Warmer weather, like spring, you could do fish a swim jig and catch some really big fish and cover a lot of water. You can even have a swim jig tied on one rod and then something like a Arky style jig tied on another rod, and just fish a jig all day of different varieties. Different types of retrieves with a jig. Some people more like Alabama, stuff like that. There's this technique called stroking a jig, and that's basically where you let it sink down to the bottom, or just for suspended fish, just let it sink to your desired depth and then stroke that thing up and down. Just so you're ripping it up a couple feet and then letting it flutter back down. That's better for more active fish or more clear water kind of stuff. Then kind of in between, just bouncing it along the bottom, you let it sink down to the bottom and just bump it up, pull it up a few inches, let it sink back down. It's kind of more of a mimicking a crawfish, whereas stroking would be more trying to mimic something like a bluegill. And it depends on how these fish are holding on the dock. If they're kind of suspending under these floats, you don't want the jig falling to the bottom. Maybe swimming it or stroking it would be a better approach in that situation. And then you can also fish it by dragging it. This is really good when it's extremely cold. They're very lethargic. Just let it sink to the bottom and then just drag it along. And as far as how the bite will feel with the jig, it's different. You need to really, it's important to pay attention to your line. Any bottom bumping bait, you really need to pay attention to where your line enters the water in particular. When it's falling, you'll see your line getting pulled towards the bait, and sometimes you'll just see your line jump, and that's a fish picking it up on the fall. Other times you'll see your line just start moving off to one side or the other. A fish has picked it up and is moving off with it at that point, and you set the hook. Other times you'll feel the traditional thump thump, basically just drive the hook home at that point. Or you'll feel like a wet sock kind of feeling, just heavy vroom kind of bite. Just gotta pay attention. You gotta pay attention at all times, because you never know when you're gonna catch your personal best. Another approach when fishing docks with a jig is skipping. Something like that kind of situation, you can't really throw overhand and get under there. You're gonna have to skip it along the bottom here. So it's kind of like skipping a rock. Just let it bounce, let it land about 5 or 6 feet in front of the dock and skip up under there. So it's like that there. And you can get really good and effective with that and skip it out the other side of these docks, really. And really get in places that these fish don't see very often. Guys got some nice toys there. Nice Phoenix. Nice Dodge truck, Challenger, Team Dodge. Nice house on the lake. He's done made it. Oh, there's Fred. Sorry, bud. That was me, not a fish. There he goes. Sorry. This laydown right here, got deep water very close to it. It's gonna be a good dock here. Sun's up, getting a little warm. There's lots of brush out here, so we're gonna kind of bear off so we don't run up on top of it. Said you really got to pay attention fishing a jig, so if I got quiet, that's why. Watching my line. Pay attention to how deep water you're fishing too. If you're throwing in 10 feet of water and that line quits sinking after a foot, you probably got a bite. Set the hook. Anytime you're not sure, just set the hook. Hook sets are free, they cost nothing. And these big fish are very good at picking something up and spitting it out before you ever even know that you got a bite. You really got to be on your toes. Alright guys, so that's it. That's the jig. Big fish catching bait. Just get some confidence in it. Get out, throw it, catch some fish. The more confidence you have in it, the better it is, because it's going to be a grind some days with it. You're only going to get a couple bites, but they're going to win you tournaments, those fish. So get out, have fun with the jig. Let's move on to the next bait.